Before we dive into today's episode, grab your favorite drink, throw on your cozy socks, and snuggle up under your favorite blanket because it's about to get real. Today, I'm sharing a story I might have hinted at before, but I've never really spilled the tea until now. It's one of those stories about how I got my first book on boundaries at 20 years old and still had no idea what boundaries actually meant. And spoiler alert, I learned the hard way through some pretty awkward and, let's be honest, hilarious moments. So if you've ever felt lost in this whole where do I end and where does everyone else begin mess of setting boundaries, or you've caught yourself bending over backwards because you're terrified of disappointing someone, this is for you. So again, grab your cozy socks, get under your favorite blanket, and let's dive in. Hey there, you just stumbled into the Anxious Creative Podcast, where overthinking turns into ahas, mess ups become magic, and anxious spirals, totally part of the process. I'm Dawn Bradley, your messy, imperfect host, here to help you, the recovering people pleaser, the perfectionist, to stop chasing the unachievable and start embracing the chaos. Spoiler alert, that's where the real magic happens anyway. So buckle up, friend, because we're about to have some laugh so hard till you cry moments, a few hard truths to help you grow, and naturally, a little, or let's be honest, a lot, of oversharing. You ready? Let's dive in. I got my very first book about boundaries when I was 20 years old, and it's so funny thinking back on that because I read it and still had no idea what boundaries are. And let me tell you, I struggled with, here, let me just start this with a story. I became really fast friends with this friend of mine, and we started hanging out all the time. We would go for morning walks at 6 a.m. We would text during the day. We would hang out at night. We went on vacations together. And I was someone, it's hard to admit, but say I like to end up in codependent friendships and relationships. I just had this intense need to be needed. Now, at the time, I didn't recognize this. I remember an old roommate of mine telling me, Dawn, you are addicted to making new friends, but as soon as the novelty wears off, it's over. And I was like, no. And I remember feeling so upset that she said that. I was like, it's just that I really enjoy getting to know people and I like to invest in people. And then when that investment time is done and we feel solid, I don't feel the need to invest as much. But looking back on this one friendship, we went on a holiday together. It wasn't really a holiday. I went on a work trip with another friend, and she didn't want the two of us to go on a trip without her. So she came along with us. And she ended up getting, it doesn't matter. I don't need to give all the details. Anyway, there was a rupture on this trip. And I'm the kind of person that if someone is trying to be chased, I'm not going to chase you. You need to be straightforward with me. Tell me what you're feeling. Tell me. And it's funny because as someone who was afraid of conflict, or I was always afraid of starting conflict, but if I felt like someone was pouting or giving me the silent treatment, I was like, no. And I think back to this friendship where she went silent and I felt like she was wanting me to be like, what's going on? What's wrong? And I was just really standing firm and this is not mine. I don't need to bring this up. And I guess maybe that was a good boundary of mine. I'm not sure. It's really tough to know what boundaries are versus what walls are. And I remember being in a therapy appointment. I started therapy when I was 18. I've seen multiple therapists through my life. I've been with the same therapist now since 2016, where I've actually realized that they don't give you the answers. They help you find your own answers. So I remember being in this therapy appointment talking about, I'm going off topic on a tangent, in pure Dawn fashion. The story I started with is not the story I'm ending with, but talking about struggling with this other relationship in my life, feeling like I wouldn't have had the vocabulary to say my boundaries were being pushed, but feeling like I wasn't being respected by this person in my life that was very close to me. And this therapist at the time brought out a whiteboard. And I think I was giving the silent treatment, which is something that I just learned growing up, is if you're unhappy with someone, you don't say anything, you just withdraw. Because saying something creates conflict, or I learned through my life that speaking up for myself, I wouldn't be heard and I would be told that I was wrong. This is my perception. Again, this is my perspective and how I perceived the reality around me. And so I learned that speaking up for myself and saying I was unhappy or I was displeased was met with, no, you're not, no, you shouldn't, you're not allowed to. So in this therapy appointment, this is the real story I was meant to tell. Sometimes it takes me a little bit to get to it. So she brings up this whiteboard and she takes a dry erase marker and she draws a line. She draws two people, then she draws a line between it. And she's like, this is what putting up a wall is. This is what's cutting someone out of your life. And she said, that's not a boundary, but so many people think that's what boundaries are. And then she goes with her finger, and I wish I could show you, like erases little bits in the line so it looks like a dotted line. And she's like, this is what a boundary is, where the connection can only come through at certain places. She says, setting a boundary isn't slamming a door in someone's face. It's saying, hey, I'm closing this door here, but I'm going to open this window over here and you're welcome to come in. And that really stuck with me. And I think when we think about boundaries in our life, one, I hear so often, and myself included, people are disrespecting my boundaries. People are pushing up against my boundaries. I felt this, especially when I went self-employed, as like a creative entrepreneur, as someone who's doing hair and loved making people feel good about themselves, and like the reward of someone saying, oh my gosh, you're the only one who knows how to do my hair. It felt so good that I would bend over backwards, because this incessant need to feel needed, to feel wanted, to feel valued, I kept handing out to everyone else. And so having boundaries felt like if I set up a boundary and told someone they couldn't text me anymore for their appointment, or I wasn't going to answer my DMs late at night, it felt like I would lose that validation of telling me I was a good person. And because I didn't believe that worth lied within myself, that I was valuable even if I said no, that I had worth even if I upset someone, if I was a wonderful person even if I disappointed someone, I didn't believe that to be true on a deep core level, not on a conscious level for sure. That I felt like saying no or speaking up or saying that doesn't work for me would cut me off from the flow of validation of believing I was a worthy human being. Oh, that sucked. And so learning how to set boundaries, and let me go back to that story of this friend. There was a rupture on that trip. I was learning how to set healthier boundaries, and I was like, no, I am not falling for this. I am not going to bend over backwards to appease someone else's needs without them communicating clearly with me. And so I remember after that trip, the three of us that were there, we all had separate flights, different places home. We all lived in the same city though, but we all had different things going on. 3 weeks later, because I was just like, she didn't say anything to me. She didn't communicate anything to me. She didn't tell me she was unhappy. She didn't tell me she was displeased. I could sense by her energy, by her demeanor, and by her actions, she was withdrawing. But I was like, this is not mine to carry. And as someone who's very empathetic and takes on other people's stuff, I lived a life up until that point. I was maybe 30, up at that point of going, is everything okay? What's going on? And trying to pull out of people. And I was really working hard on what's mine to own, what's my responsibility. If someone is upset with me, they need to tell me. And so 3 weeks went by after this vacation. And I finally got a text saying, so are we just not friends anymore? And I was shocked. And I remember, I believe what I replied was, of course we're still friends. And she said, so are we just never going to talk again? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, things are fine on my end. And it was this evolution of myself of learning I'm not going to take on or soothe someone else's discomfort if they're not going to communicate with me, which is really hard, but was learning to set a boundary. Now, in my business, it's a little bit different. I used to appease. I would be so frustrated with a client late canceling, but I wouldn't enforce my policy because I was like, if I enforce my policy, they might get mad. And if they get mad, then they'll maybe like question why I have the policy. And if they question it, do I really even know why it's there? And I didn't really know why it was there and I didn't understand it. And this is the stuff that I teach inside of Rock Your Business to my students. To have healthy boundaries, you have to understand why you have your boundaries, what they're there for. You have to believe in them and you have to feel confident that they are fair for both you and the other person. But because I was just feeling like I didn't follow through on anything, I just thought the threat of a cancellation policy would stop people from canceling. And I've always said to my students, unless your cancellation policy states you cannot cancel, the cancellation policy says, if you cancel, this is the consequence. And just like little kids, I think about my parents being like, if you kids don't settle down, we're going to stop this car and we're going to turn back around. To my knowledge and my memory, my parents never stopped the car and turned it back around. So we learned very quickly that was an empty threat. And just like kids, you teach people how to treat you. Your words are not what people notice, it's your actions. And so your words saying, just so you know, I'm going to have to charge you, but then you don't. Or if you keep trying to warn your clients, but they're not changing their behavior, ask yourself, what are your actions? Because boundaries are actions you take for yourself and they are consequences you implement. A boundary is not for someone else to respect. It is for you to follow through on. And I am someone who, I don't even want to admit it, but following through on things has never been my strong suit. The amount of things that I have started and never finished. I remember wanting to become a lifeguard. You maybe heard this story in a past episode. I wanted to become a lifeguard. I got all the way through. I was one course away. I had to do some volunteer hours. I walked into my local small town swimming pool and I was intimidated. And nobody said hello and nobody asked what I was doing there. And I felt, who am I to be here? What am I to do? And I turned around and I left and I never did my volunteer hours and I never became a lifeguard. One volunteer thing away and one course away. When I tried out, I was very athletic growing up. In grade 9, I tried out for the volleyball team and it was the first time I ever got cut. And I vowed I would never try out for volleyball ever again. I remember in grade 10 when I got into high school, they're like, come try out for volleyball. And I was like, nope, I am not going to experience that level of rejection. I was so embarrassed. I was always athletic. I was always sporty. I got cut from a team that was so mortifying and embarrassing. Also, the deeper story, I remember asking my friend, I was sick one day. I was like, did they post who made it on the team? And she said, yeah, I'm pretty sure your name was there. So I showed up for a practice and I hadn't made the team. I was so deeply embarrassed and ashamed that I had thought that I had gone on there, that I vowed to never experience that feeling again. And so boundaries, that's a little off topic on boundaries, but anxious, creative, ADHD, we're all in this podcast together. But boundaries are something you do for yourself and you have to follow through and respect yourself. It's not someone else's responsibility. And so when you are implementing a boundary with a friend, with a family member, or with a partner, you have to be the one to follow through on it. And if they push up against it, that's your opportunity to exercise your strength in it. So if a client late cancels and you say, just so you know, like, I'll give you this past this time, but in the future, I'm going to have to charge you. And through my consultation process that I teach in Rock Your Business, it's so easy. So many of my students, people will be like, hey, I got to miss my appointment. And they'll say, no worries, just so you know, like there'll be a fee. And the client will be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to move things around and I'll make it happen. Like when you start to show up and know how to communicate clearly and effectively, compassionately, and respectfully, it's not aggressive, and you create this loyalty, trust, and respect that comes back without force, without aggression. Because it's easy to get aggressive and combative. We all know those people that maybe that's why you fear putting boundaries, that they're so forceful and they're so domineering that everyone just follows their lead but doesn't like them and complains about them behind their back. But you can gently and quietly and sympathetically and empathetically have authority without aggressiveness that draws in respect from the other people. And so my students that are like, hey, yeah, absolutely. I just want to remind you of my cancellation policy. So you can cancel, but you will be charged an amount. And then all of a sudden clients are like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Let me move things around. Like I get countless messages of this. So also doing this in your personal life. Hey, I just wanted to remind you that XYZ, I'm trying to think of a personal example and I'm drawing a blank. I've had to set up boundaries with people in my life that was really hard for me, but in order to keep myself healthy, I've had to take time away from close loved ones to heal. And it was hard. And there was times when they pushed, I said, I will reach out when I'm ready to speak to you again. And they would continue to reach out for their own healing journey. And I had to stay strong. And so next time you're feeling like, why does everyone push up against my boundaries? It's like that phrase, that saying, I don't know if you've ever heard it, where it's like when you pray for patience, God doesn't take away everything that requires patience. He gives you opportunity to be patient. And I'm in a season in my life right now. Okay, so sidebar. One of my biggest fears is being blindsided. And I've worked through this in therapy because I've been blindsided by a lot of things in my life. By death, by failure, by rejection, by so many things. And I was like, I want to work through this so that I'm always prepared. And like this hypervigilance of being on and aware of every possibility so that blindsidingness could never show up again. And I've recently been in a situation where I was completely blindsided. But the cool thing about it is that I'm bouncing back quicker. And here's the thing is, when it comes to boundaries, it's not that you'll never fail to implement a boundary or you'll not follow through on one like you ever wanted to, but you'll recognize it sooner. You'll bounce back and you'll recover. And I know there's been times in my life with boundaries where I've been like, you know what? I've had to retract. And so this is where I want you to know it's not about getting things perfect and getting it done right and like learning boundaries. Like it's one thing to know something. It's another to do it. Our brains learn quicker than our reflexes. Meaning if you've had a lifetime of being a yes person, of never saying no, of always appeasing everyone and feeling exhausted, burnt out, tired, and you just want to run away. You want to shift careers. You want to move to a new place. You just want to like bail on all your responsibilities and start over because then you'll have relief, but it just all follows you again. I just lost my train of thought completely. This is the most ADHD thing. But realizing when you have those moments where you slip back into old behaviors. I always use the example, and this is like going to require your imagination, but if your entire life we've been told 5 + 5 is 10, and then somehow let's pretend that science proves that 5 + 5 actually equals 9, and it works and it's proven. In a knee-jerk moment when someone's think fast, what's 5 + 5, you're going to go back to what you've known your entire life. So learning boundaries and implementing boundaries is going to take some time, and you're going to fail and you're going to want to go back. And as long as you surround yourself with people who respect you, and you'll learn quickly who do and who don't. And the way you communicate it will really help navigate people understanding. If you get really point blank and aggressive and no, this is my boundary, people might end up confused. But if you learn to compassionately communicate more clearly, you'll be surprised at how many more people understand, but saying, hey, I messed up. And owning your faults, owning your mistakes, because you're going to continue to make them, especially when it comes to boundaries. And so when you fall back into an old pattern, and let's use work as an example because it's such a great one. And when you say yes to a client and you're like, you know what, I did that in a knee-jerk moment because I was trying to please them and I wasn't thinking about myself and I didn't take a moment to pause. Just go to them and say, hey, you know what, I just realized that I said yes, which is actually against my time working out of my hours. Now I'm going to follow through with it, but I just want to let you know that I normally don't work Sundays. And moving forward, if I say no in the future, that's why. Now, I see people getting upset. Like, I can't believe my clients ask me to work on my day off. Do they know it's your day off? And also, I truly believe, and you may hate me for this, I truly believe that there is no harm in asking. Someone asking something from you, and I had this conversation with my friend Lindsay once. She's like, I always believed that I only ask things of people that I think are reasonable. So I assume people would only ask me something that's reasonable. But there are many people in this world that are like, there's no harm in asking. And you'd be surprised at what you get when you ask. I've learned to adopt this. I'm going to ask for what I want and see. It's on the other person's responsibility to say yes or no. And when you get better at being able to say yes authentically and no authentically in your true self, and that's usually taking a pause and going, I really want to say yes, but just give me a day or give me a couple hours to just double check on this. Don't feel like you have to give an answer in that moment. But when you start to get to that place, you feel so much more empowered. And yet when you do a knee-jerk reaction, because it will happen, especially in learning boundaries, be kind to yourself, be gentle, forgive yourself, and recognize that this is a part of you that's showing up that's wanted to protect you from something. The reason why you lack boundaries, the reason why you struggle to stand up for yourself, the reason why you struggle to respect yourself first, and you either continue to people please and get walked all over, or you go into what I used to do is I'd get walked all over until I got so exhausted and then the walls went up and I would just shut people out, cut people out, walk away, ghost people. And like I basically was like taking tiny steps back without telling people. And then there would just become a breaking point where I'm like, I'm done, and I would just cut people out. And it's not something I'm proud of. But I didn't know how to say no in the little things. I didn't know how to say this doesn't feel right to me because I was so scared of rejection. I was so scared of upsetting other people because if I upset someone else, that would cut off that flow of validation that made me feel like I was a worthy human being. So what does it even mean to have boundaries? I really believe what it means to have boundaries is it means to respect yourself first. And there's a difference between self-respect and selfishness. And I think what's happened in my past, if I can speak from my own personal experience, is I would self-sacrifice, self-abandon in my work, in my life, in my relationships. And then all of a sudden, I would get so fed up, I'd get so frustrated, pointing the finger at everyone else when really I was oblivious to the fact that it was all about me. But it was so uncomfortable to look at, hey, it's me, I'm the problem. I just made it everyone else's problem because then I didn't have to look at myself. Then I didn't have to examine myself. I could just make it everyone else's issue. I would get so exhausted, so tired that I would just become completely selfish, cut everyone out, only focus on me. This is what life should be like. And then slowly it'd creep back in. It'd be like, oh, like someone said something nice. It felt good. I've recovered. I'm feeling pretty good. I can give more. And then I slowly start giving and giving and giving and not telling people, hey, you know what, that doesn't work for me. Or I really want to say yes, but I have to say no right now. and not recognizing that's actually healthy and good. And then slowly I would end up back in that situation where I'd get so fed up, so exhausted, and then I'd cut people out, or I'd switch my career, or I'd move to a new city, or like I can see the pattern in my career, especially. Started in 2001. In 2003, I moved to the UK. Then I came back home for 4 months. Then I went to Australia. Then I came home. Then I started my own business. And 4 years later, I moved to a new city. And then 4 years later, it's like a 4-year pattern. I started my education business. And here I am in a moment right now where I'm a little bit bored or disconnected and feeling like, what could be the shift and the change? And really, maybe it's a matter of, have I had healthy boundaries with myself? Because boundaries apply to other people. What are healthy boundaries? But what are healthy boundaries with yourself? It's knowing the moments that your body's telling you, this isn't working. Something's not right here. And it doesn't mean you always have to jump ship. And the thing is that sometimes we ignore the whispers of our body or our intuition or the environment saying, the way this is right now isn't working. And instead of listening to it and making micro shifts, we ignore it until you quit your job, you move to a new city, you end your relationship because you didn't listen to the micro movements, and then all of a sudden you think you need extremes. Healthy boundaries are listening to the whispers of, hey, something's off right now. And it doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that the other person or parties are at fault. It just means you need to do an internal check and you need to really get in tune with yourself. Healthy boundaries. What does it mean to have healthy boundaries? It means to be self-aware enough to recognize when nothing may be intrusively bad or inherently wrong going on, but there's something telling you that you need to say no, or you need to go a different path, or you need to redirect. And things don't always have to be bad. And I think that's what happens a lot for me, especially, is I lack boundaries because I'm like, what they're asking for isn't unreasonable. And I should be a kind person and do unto others as I would do unto myself, and treat others how you want to be treated, yada, yada. When realizing sometimes if you have given, or you need to rejuvenate, or you're an introvert like me and you need time alone, that's really important. But sometimes being alone is really scary because you're left with your thoughts. So what does it mean to have healthy boundaries? It means to be able to self-reflect, self-soothe, and self-assess, I really believe. And when it comes to boundaries, I have 3 types of boundaries, especially in my business, that I talk about. And I talk about a time boundary, like how much time, like the amount of time. When I first went self-employed, I only considered the hours I was working behind a chair with clients as my work hours. I did not consider the time I was working on my business doing books, where I was scheduling people, where I was texting with people, where I was rescheduling, when I was making my website. And I had 0 boundaries with myself, which led to burnout and exhaustion, because then I'd work more hours behind the chair, and then I didn't think about all the hours, and I basically never turned off work, especially with these little computers in our hands. We need to learn to have better boundaries with ourselves, which means being able to stop being addicted to your phone. Like, I was laying on my couch the other night and I was trying to read a book, and every other page I'd pick up my phone and look at it, which tells me that there's an addiction. And something I've gotten away of, which I'm going to start implementing again, is I used to turn off my phone for 7 days, twice a year. And I would get away. I would leave the house. I would let people know where I was, and there would be a way to reach me. But I would turn off my phone for 7 days. I didn't listen to music. I didn't listen to podcasts. Digital free. And the first 4 days, I felt like an addict in recovery. I'd be twitchy. The last 3 days, I was like, I don't want to turn it back on. Addiction to our phones, I believe, is a really stronghold that is happening in society right now. We're so connected to people through devices. We're not knowing how to connect in real life. And then we don't know how to communicate in real life. If it's easier for you to have a hard conversation or set a boundary through text rather than face-to-face, I think this is an indication of where there's an opportunity for growth in your communication. There's an opportunity for growth in your relationships with people. So the time boundary. Then there's an energy boundary. Especially as empathetic people in creative fields where we're serving other people, or just in relationship to other people and friendships. If you can't be in a conversation with someone who's telling you, how they're struggling with something, and you not feel drained walking away, then you don't have a good energy boundary. And one thing that I like to do is, if someone is telling me something that I'm starting to feel drained by, because I like to take on other people's problems, I picture a glass dome going around me, and I can show up and I can listen and I can be kind and compassionate, but I'm not going to take on. And I picture their energy bouncing off this glass dome. And I don't know if therapists do this, but I would assume that they would have to, because therapists don't generally hear about people's happiest days. You can't take on everybody else's stuff. And I know it feels good to take it on because you can see the relief on them, but you're burdening yourself. and you're wearing yourself down and you're burning yourself out energetically. And so either you need to protect your energy while you're talking to them. And my example I've always shared, and it was wild, is when I realized this like glass dome thing. I had a client that I loved, but every time she left, I was like, I'm exhausted. I love spending time with her. She's great. But why do I feel so drained? And I realized that she was taking my energy, like unconsciously, whether it like seems woo-woo-y, but it was true. So the next time she was in, she was talking, sharing, and I was starting to feel drained, and I was washing her hair at the sink, and I just pictured this glass dome going around me and her energy not being able to, or her not being able to take energy from me. And literally as I pictured this glass dome, like seal around the floor around me, she like caught her words. She was like, da-da-huh. And it was like I cut off the supply. It was so wild. And then she continued on, and I was able to be present, compassionate, kind, and caring without taking it on. And then the other thing is a money boundary. I talk to so many people in my Rock Your Business program that are like, I'm not making the money I want. I want to raise my prices, or I can't seem to stop discounting. And it's because they're so scared to have boundaries around their money. Or they're like, I'm bringing in the money, but I don't know where it goes. And they're spending on all these things that are unnecessary. Learning how to have boundaries with your money and learning how to have boundaries and respect with yourself with the way you charge and knowing that it's fair is really important. This is the stuff that I go on inside of Rock Your Business. So what are boundaries actually? I believe boundaries are self-respect. I truly believe at the heart of it, boundaries are self-respect. And it's not pushing people out or keeping people away. It's showing them how they can connect with you in a healthy way, how they can stay close to you in a way that doesn't hurt you. And that is why boundaries are so important, my friend. Let's be real. Boundaries aren't easy, and I'm guessing you felt that into today's episode. It's not just about saying no. It's about standing tall for what you deserve while still showing up for the people you care about, especially yourself. And if you're ready to move from overwhelmed to profitable in your business without selling your soul or working yourself into the ground, I've got something you need. Head over to dawnbradley.com/free class and get instant access to my free masterclass. It's all about helping you build a business that supports your life with healthy boundaries, compassionate communication, community, and accountability, not the other way around. Or if you're just curious to explore more of what I have to offer, head to my website, dawnbradley.com, and dive into all my blog posts and free resources. But please remember, boundaries aren't about keeping others out. They're about keeping you safe, sane, and successful. So until next week, stay weird, stay messy, and stay unapologetically yourself.